Why I Keep the Door Shut by Spooks Williams P.I. The sun is setting. That means giant blood-sucking mosquitoes and giant moths and God knows what else, especially on a hot summer night like this one. But that isn't why I keep the door shut. I hear crime goes up when the heat outside boils. It's true in this town. A string of burglars hit the neighbours' houses across the street. New security systems went in, and some broke down and bought dogs. Those hounds will be barking tonight. After all, they haven't caught anyone yet. But that isn't why I keep the door shut. The petty crimes are nothing compared to the serial murders in the city. The first victim found was missing an arm, the next a leg, and yet another a head. Things escalated when the police chief was found, minus his badge, and the rest of his torso. The papers ran wild, saying someone was building a man or a monster. For most people, such findings were extremely disturbing. But that isn't the reason I keep the door shut. I know of the threats few living still remember, the doppelgangers, the shadow changers, the puppeteers, and the faceless ones that steal souls in the park at night. The evil of these creatures is unspeakable, has ended more lives than I could possibly imagine. In some cases they've done far worse. Hell, they might even give me a run for my money. On a bad night anyway. They still aren't the reason my door stays shut. The ex-wife called and said she'd run away this afternoon, looking for her daddy. She's out there, somewhere, searching. I would know. The higher the full moon rises, the better I can smell her. But her daddy can't see her on nights like this one. The ones where he starts to howl with the hunger. Not after her brother's accident. Her brother, all alone in the woods that night a few months back. My little girl is out there, so I can't be. That's why I keep the door shut. I'm Not Alone by The Wee Doug. A year ago, I had a near-death experience. I was walking along minding my own business when some guy hit me with his car. He'd been looking at his phone and I had had my headphones in. There was fault on both parts, really. I lay on that road and felt the life leave me. It was a few moments of agony, and then nothing. Blackness and nothing. I woke up later in a hospital bed, all pins and casts. The doctors told me my heart had stopped for 5 minutes. He told me they don't know how, but I suddenly burst back into life. Living, breathing, screaming in pain, and oddly laughing. The doctor told me these things are rare but can happen. I spent months in physiotherapy, practically learning to walk all over again. Eventually I was released, wheelchair and housebound. A nurse would come by and help me every day. Everything was normal. Well, as normal as things can be when you're filled with metal and covered in casts. The nurse would ask me how I'm feeling, often met with a sarcastic remark, and check me over, helping me here and there. He would always do his last checks around 8, before wishing me a good night and locking up. That's when it started. I'd close my eyes and hear a voice. It's hard to describe. It was completely alien, yet a part of it felt familiar to me somehow. It would whisper things, but they were too quiet to hear. I'd strain and focus, but could never hear them. Next thing I know, I'm awake and in agony as normal. My day would play out the same, and sleep would come once more, along with the same inaudible whispers till I woke up. I asked my nurse, Jerry, if he had ever dealt with anything like this. He told me that all patients who had been in accidents such as mine would have dreams from time to time, especially in the first few months, of voices and sometimes images like this. He said to relax, it was just the brain trying to piece the lost time back together. As it always takes in information, even when dormant, but can take time to process it all. Safe to say that gave me a little comfort for the time being. I lay in bed that night, the pain medication flowing through me, trying to sleep. Being in such a state made it difficult to get in a comfortable position, as every move made the body pulse in agony. Trust me, medication dulls the pain. It doesn't take it away. Eventually, sleep took me. I heard the whispers again that night, only this time they were louder, clearer than the last time. I could only pick up bits and pieces. It was a jumbled mess of mixed messages. I heard sweet nothings whispered in my ear, mundane statements. It all seemed like nonsense. That is, until I made out one word perfectly. A harsh and cruel voice hissed. That voice felt like a cold claw wrapping around my throat. My mind reeled and span as it fought with all its might to escape that cold grasp. Every fibre of my being clawing and screaming for me to wake up. I awoke in a position that had me in agonized screaming, my mind still reeling as I vomited across the floor beside my bed. What was that voice? What did it mean by mine? I thought. I didn't even know if I wanted to find out. The day panned out as thought, slow and tedious. That's probably the worst part about being a convalescent, the tedium. You watch minutes stretch to hours and they feel like days. Jerry came for his first visit and kept me company, checking all was well as normal. He said his goodbyes and told me he'd be back at his usual time. I look forward to it, I said with the usual roll of the eyes, which we both laughed at. The tedium began once more, seconds dragging as the loneliness pressed in. I started to doze in my chair when, from the back room, I heard a thump. It was as if something had fell to the floor. "Jerry, you still here, mate?" I called, expecting the usual upbeat voice to meet my ears. Nothing. Silence came back. I thought nothing of it as I just took it. A mispiled stack of clothes must have fallen. However, just as I settled once more, a louder thump rang out, this time closer, in the hall adjoining the room I was sat in. The room suddenly felt different, chilled, as though something that shouldn't be had arrived. Just like that, memories of the night before flooded my mind, the voices and chaos of those dreams. I sat transfixed with fear and tried to turn my aching neck. Pain shot down my spine and made every inch of me contract in agony. Another thump rattled the wall behind me. The fright made my body ache to spring into action as my brain burst into the panic of fight or flight. "Please, just leave me alone. Just go away," I begged. Tears streaming down my face from fear and agony. Once again, another thump, closer to the door this time. My heart rattled in my chest and threatened to rip through my ribcage. Then I heard it, that voice again, that horrific, jealous, rattling voice. "Mine!" It crackled like it was coming through an old radio. That made my blood run cold. It felt like an icy river was running through my veins. Another thump, this time at the door. My body jolted again, as though trying to flee. I cursed in pain and fear, as every inch of me was screaming to run away. Just then, the door handle began to turn, ever so slightly left and right. It was as if something was toying with me, or like it wasn't able to grasp the handle fully. I summoned every ounce of strength I had left and forced my quickly contracting lungs to let out a bellow. "Leave me alone!" I screamed at the top of my voice. Just like that, the handle stopped moving. The atmosphere lifted. I felt the fear vanish from me. I felt alone again. That was until I heard a sickeningly sweet laughter from right beside my ear. My heart leapt. I turned my head to see a vacant space. I wanted to leave so desperately, but how was I meant to do that? I was trapped in this house for as long as I was healing. I sat there, anxious and uncomfortable, not from my injuries, but from the ever-pervasive atmosphere and the dread of what could come. I prayed for Jerry to be early. I prayed for anyone to come. Anyone. But that thing that had made its presence very known in my house, in my dreams. Eventually Jerry returned. His face changed to a mask of worry when he saw the sweating, terrified wreck that I had become. "Is everything all right?" he asked. If I could have moved, I would have smashed my fist to his jaw. I explained all that had happened while he was away, and that son of a bitch, he laughed it off. He said it must have been a side effect from all the pain medication. I know what I heard. I know what I saw, and I certainly know what I felt. I begged him, sobbing and blubbering like a child, just to take me somewhere else. I pleaded with him and told him the house was not safe. He told me to calm down and gave me medication to sleep. I nodded off as Jerry laughed, telling me he'd be back in the morning as per usual. He was met with a grunt as my senses left me. I drifted down into unconsciousness as the drugs took effect and thought I was finally getting peace, finally had real undisturbed sleep. My eyes opened and I was met by the sight of the dimly lit room, which looked like my living room. The colour seemed washed out, like when you leave something in the sun for days. The light barely lit the room, but I could make out figures in the darkness. Some tall, some short, and some vaguely child height. My mind panicked and my body flared into life, this time not met by agony. I dived to my feet and realized I must have been dreaming. It was the only possible answer. I stood tall and strong against the figures, shrouded in darkness. "Go away," I said, mustering all my courage. "You're all just dreams now. Go away." I yelled, courage filling my heart. The figures said nothing and stayed still. They didn't even make a sound. "Did you not hear me? Go away!" I spat at them. The figures remained silent and watching until, finally, one of the child ones raised its tiny arm and pointed at me. Confusion raced through my mind and the courage I had left me. What do you want?" I stuttered at them, the cold hands of terror grasping for my vocal cords. At that, they all, stiffly, like someone with broken bones, raised their fingers and began pointing. My mind raced and my blood froze when I heard, from behind me, that raspy, sickening voice that sounded like it was from a throat long dead. "You are mine now, little lamb." I span around to see a tall, skinny thing that looked like a man but wasn't. Its body was naked and starved, the skin pale and lifeless with lumps from what looked like bones. Its face contorted into a sickening grin, with yellow teeth and broken lips that were cracked and ripped. Its eyes were simply black pits, like a shark when it smells blood in the water. It grabbed at my throat with gnarled hands, attached arms that looked too long to be human. They wrapped around my throat and choked the air from my lungs as it studied me with a sadistic glee before dropping me, gasping and wheezing to the floor. "Perfect," it wheezed, before hoisting me back to my feet. The thing shot its long, gnarled fingers to my mouth. I clamped my jaws shut as tight as possible, but it wasn't enough. The creature's fingers pried my jaws open and began to work their way down my throat. The taste of decay and feeling of something unnatural invading it sent my body into screaming terror. The thing continued to force its way down my throat until both arms were submerged. The last thing I remember is its hideous breath on my face as it came in close and whispered in my ear, "You are mine." I woke up to Jerry standing over me, his face awash with fright. He told me he had come in to find me convulsing on the bed, that he had managed to stabilize me. He said I had woken up during and had begun to laugh. His face went white as he turned to me. "It wasn't your voice I heard laughing, mate," he said, his hands shaking as he spoke. "I'm healed now. I can walk again and do things for myself. However, I still have the occasional dream. It only comes some days, but it's gotten worse. Even now I feel it, like something clawing at the back of my mind, screaming to be let out. But this body is mine."